It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Why, Audacity? Why? I update this program because you have to, I guess. You don't want to have old software, and it changes settings on the computer. There's even a button that says, do you want to reset the settings? I don't check that button. I don't want my settings to be reset. I have things set for the reasons that I have them set for. But no, I have to go through and refix a couple things that got reset. But that's okay. Oh, by the way, you're listening to the Phil Ferguson Show, and I'm me, Phil Ferguson. We have a action-packed, fun show coming up. We have an interview with Mary Beth O'Connor and her book, What Is, Was, Is. It still is. From Junkie to Judge. She spent like 15 plus years doing drugs, meth, how she survived, the stories and the problems that she had. Oh, what some stories she's got to talk to us about. We're going to go over some of that, but of course, I don't want to spoil all of it, so you can go buy the book if you want to have the rest of the story. And I also have a segment on a little bit on hedge funds, but mostly for me, it's about a concept called the all-weather portfolio. It's something that is promoted, has been promoted, still is promoted on the internet, and I actually had someone ask me about it, and the hedge funds and the all-weather portfolio kind of all came together at the same time, so that's an upcoming Investing Skeptically segment that you can listen to. The other thing, just so you know, the update on the SEC examination, the examination continues, and I've been asked for more information. I've had a couple of phone chats to clarify and follow up on some things. So I'm still working through that. I think my grand total of time spent over the last several months is now about 60 hours of getting things together. And one area I'm getting dinged a little bit is accounting stuff. Now, I have an MBA, a master's in business administration. I had an accounting class. There was a lot of accounting classes you could have taken while getting your MBA if you wanted to test and be certified as a CPA, certified public accountant. I don't like accounting. Never did. So I just took the one minimum required class and avoided accounting. And even that was 30 plus years ago. So I haven't had accounting for a long time. So there's a couple of things that I'm not doing right. So at some point, it looks like I'm going to have to buy accounting software and be more rigorous with logging things and tracking them. I've been tracking things in spreadsheets, and it was plenty good enough for me, and it was plenty good enough for the tax man, but there are some specific rules, regulations in reference to registered investment advisors that I am finding challenging without proper accounting software. So that's something that I'll have to do. But yeah, so the journey continues, and it's not over yet because I know there's a few things. There's always going to be a few things in my head because there are like thousands upon thousands of rules. There's going to be a few things that I haven't gotten just right. And it was fascinating. A couple of items in the last phone conversation that I had, they were bringing up things, and then they were saying, well, we may not even put this on the letter. So in my head, I'm kind of like, well, why are we talking about it? But it's just something that maybe I'm not doing quite right, but it doesn't go to the level of being on the letter. So when I get the letter, I expect it to be, I hope, dare I say, I pray. I yearn for it to be a few items that I'm not doing just right, and I will fix them. So there's that. But in the meantime, it's been a lot of hours of time on top of my regular job, on top of travel, on top of the podcast. So I am looking forward to some time off. And, when I get done with my time off, of course, I'll do whatever I have to do to make things right. So anyway, there's that. A quick politics thing. Trump is still being investigated. I'm very excited about that. So I guess he got fined $5,000 and then an additional 10, I think, maybe a week ago, because he can't keep his mouth shut because of the gag order. I am looking forward to the day when he gets to spend a night or 3 days in prison, because he will not be able to resist himself. And there's even the possibility that he will use that as a fundraising thing. But unfortunately, particularly in the Georgia case, but also in the New York case, he's gotten tight enough on funds that he's no longer paying attorneys for his other co-defendants and just expects them to honor their loyalty pledge and not rat him out. But they're flipping. I think we know of 5 or 6 so far that are not only flipping and telling the facts of what happened in the room or the rooms, but they're turning over additional evidence that either they didn't make it known that they had before, that suddenly they found. It's going to be sadly, an interesting period of time coming up. Another completely unrelated random topic. The United Auto Workers apparently are on the verge of signing or voting to agree to new contracts for all of the auto manufacturers, which is cool. And they've gotten apparently 25%, give or take, pay raises coming in the next several years. They're going to come in gradually. So congratulations to them. And I'm especially happy that the President Biden, went to Michigan and went on the picket line and made it known that he thought that people should be paid a fair wage. So I'm all for that. The idea that people can make millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or even billions of dollars a year, and that someone who is doing the work should make $8 or $10 an hour. And I know I wouldn't want to try to figure out how to live on $15 an hour anymore. I mean, I made minimum wage way back in the day. That was $2.85. And you get this risk of going, well, I got by on $2.85. Well, things are more expensive now. So what is the right balance? I don't know. I know it's not $8. There's just no way. You can't get by on $8. Even in a really small town in the Midwest, I don't think you can get by. You're going to have to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs. I don't know. It's unfortunate, the attitude of Americans that has created the situation where it's okay for CEOs to get paid tens or hundreds of millions, and for workers working full time. Not that the CEOs aren't working, but that they should have people on their staff or in their company that can barely make enough money to get by, to be able to pay their rent and for food at the same time. It shouldn't be that way. We have enough money. There's plenty of money to go around. Plenty of money to go around. So a couple little rants, concerns, updates. Got some travel plans coming up. I'll tell you about those after I'm back. Speaking of just getting back, I was at SciCon, the Center for Skeptical Inquiries conference in Vegas every year, and that was a hoot. And it seems like every year, even though the speakers are freaking amazing, and one of them was Bill Nye the Science Guy, many other famous people. I'm not going to go through the whole list because it's over, but you could go look it up. CSI-Con. I'm assuming they plan to do it next year. I'm assuming it's going to be amazing next year, and it's going to be in Vegas next year. Actually, I know it's going to be in Vegas next year, but the name of the casino escapes me. It's in the same area as the Flamingo, so it's not too far. It's going to be great next year. The big question I have is, why aren't there more people there? What was it that the amazing meeting did to get 12 to 14, maybe even 1,500 people? And why does SciCon only get 500 or 600 people? Is it marketing? Is it a different era? Is it a different time? Is the time of the really big atheist convention, the secular, the skeptical convention, is that time past? Can it be recreated? Can we get 1,000 people next year? And this also applies to American Atheist Conference, which I go to, FFRF Conference, which I go to. Also this year, I went to BajaCon in Canada, much smaller, maybe 200 or 300 people. But what a fun thing that is. If you want to do something fun and wickedly affordable just over the border in Canada, next year, go get your freaking passport and make sure you sign up to go to BajaCon. The list of speakers will blow your mind. And they don't play around like Skepticon did or CSI Con does, where it's about skepticism. BajaCon is straight up, hardcore, in your face atheism, and how do we get people out of religion? And I love it. I freaking absolutely love it. And of course, so is American Atheists, which will be Easter of next year. I want to say it's in Philadelphia, but I may be getting my locations mixed up because some of the national ones, they move around. Also in February, I think it is, of 24, the local organization here in Central Florida, CFFC, Central Florida Free Thought Community, Central Florida Free Thought Community, which I am a member of. And the Williamsons run that. Man, they are hard working fuckers. I mean, I'm telling you, the amount of events and organizations and meetings that go on, the conference every other year, earlier this year in 2023. So there was another one I was at earlier this year. Absolutely amazing, staggering the amount of people that help them, all the volunteers, everyone pitching in. Fantastic. But anyway, I lose my focus. Coming up in February, there's a cruise. So if you want to get away from the cold, I'm assuming there's seats left on this boat. It's a big boat, but I don't know that it's got seats left or not. But it's going to be fantastic, and I would love for you to come down to Florida and join us for that. I'm sure you could just look up CFFC 2024 cruise, Mediterranean? Not Mediterranean. I wish it was Mediterranean cruise. Caribbean, whatever. It's going to go out in the water, and it's going to be relatively warm compared to where you probably live. And it's going to be relatively warm to where I live, even in Central Florida. So looking forward to that. Check that out, see if there's still tickets available, and you'll see all the details at that website. And maybe for the next show, I'll actually look it up so I can speak more intelligently. But anyway, that's plenty. Let's take a little pause, and we'll talk about the all-weather portfolio and some information on hedge funds. And then right after that, a eye-opening, mind-altering experience, the interview with Mary Beth O'Connor, who is the author of From Junkie to Judge. I know you're going to love it.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Well, it's been a really interesting debate, and I've loved some of the questions from the floor. I suppose I'm slightly disappointed that Anne Widdecombe in particular should say, oh, I knew they'd bring up condoms and child rape and homosexuality. It's a bit like a burglar in court, so you would bring up that burglary and that manslaughter. You never mention the fact I give my father a birthday present. You know, it's, yes, are you getting the message? There is a reason we hammer home these issues, because they matter. They matter to people's hearts and souls. I make no apology to the lady who said this is supposed to be intelligence squared. Why are you being so emotional? We're talking about religion and souls here. I make no apology for being emotional about that subject. I make no apology for apparently not understanding the theology of Thomas Aquinas and Augustine of Hippo. or the Council of Trent, or various other extraordinary conventions that ruled on limbo. Don't tell me there's some magisterial and mystical reason behind limbo that I'm too stupid to understand. That's not good enough. It really isn't. As a rather more contemporary theologian, Bultmann said, the problem with mysticism is it begins in mist and ends in schism. And it's terribly disappointing to hear.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. I received an email from a listener of the show that has been watching some videos on YouTube. I know, dangerous, right? And it had, some of these videos had great ways to beat the market, which I thought were fascinating. And two of these ideas, one was the all-weather fund created by the famous hedge fund manager Ray Dalio. And the other idea, of course, was hedge funds. Now, hedge funds are wickedly expensive. And while they probably make a killing, a ton of money for the people that own and run the hedge funds, they don't make money for you. So in short, hedge funds charge you 2% plus 20% of what they make. The owners of the hedge fund, the people managing the hedge fund, get to keep fees and all kinds of things that they pay themselves in the from the companies that they buy. And these are very complicated issues, and we've talked about them on the show. But for the average person, everybody listening to the show, whether you have $1,000 or $10 million or more, of course, if you have more than that, you should email me, Phil at Polaris Financial Planning. Anyway, very famous. You can look this up on Investopedia. Warren Buffett made a 10-year bet with a hedge fund guru kind of guy. And Buffett's position was that the S&P 500 would beat a hand-picked basket of hedge funds. And the guy who was betting on the hedge funds, he was able to pick the hedge funds he wanted to use. Well, the results were so profoundly devastating that after 9 years, the guy who picked hedge funds conceded, admitted defeat, and ended the bet because there was absolutely no way they were going to catch up. So here's what the S&P 500 index did in the 9 years of the 10-year bet. It was up 85.4%. Not even that particularly good, but, really nice returns for no work on your part. You just put it in the index fund, right? Wow. You invest $1 million. 9 years later, you have 1.85 million. Pretty fucking cool. The hedge funds, 5 of them, returned cumulatively over 5 years, 9%, 28%. One of them was 63%. The next one was 3%. And the fifth one was 7.5%. On average, they returned a cumulative total of 22%. 22% return versus 85.4% return. And these were hedge funds picked by a hedge fund guru who knew all the best hedge funds to pick. This is the kind of thing that people get all excited. They hear about hedge fund owners making a lot of money, and they do. And you want to play along, that's fine. Guess what? They take you also, not just the companies they buy and break up and destroy. The other fun thing that came up was Ray Dalio's all-weather portfolio. Now, I don't know when he created this, but it's been around for a while, at least 10 years, maybe longer. And one of his ideas in his portfolio, he has 40% long-term treasury bonds. Those are U.S. treasury bonds with 20-year or more time frame, duration years to maturity, and another 15% on intermediate bonds. And if you had used a portfolio like this in the mid 80s or even the mid 90s, you probably did okay. You probably actually did quite well after the dot-com crash in 99-2000, but you may not have done well in the run-up in the dot-com, but that's a whole nother segment. So it also has gold, it has commodities, and then it has only 30% in the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index. So the reason that this was built is that because in the early and mid 80s, long-term U.S. Treasury bonds were paying 12% interest, 10% interest. Absolutely, staggeringly fantastic. And if we ever get to a point where long-term U.S. Treasuries are paying 8 or 9 or 10%, I will be jumping on that like, I don't know, but I'll be jumping on that because that's fantastic. If I can make 8 or 9 or 10% in U.S. Treasuries versus 8 or 9 or 10% in the stock market without the volatility, and if and when interest rates go down, not only do you get the yield or the dividend from those bonds, they can appreciate in value. And so you can make a lot of money if you're on the correct side of history and buy bonds when the rates are really high, when the yields are really high, and hold them until the yields are really low. Now, the problem with this portfolio is in the last several years, it hasn't done particularly well. And over 10 years, it's been crushed because long-term bonds, as measured by, let's see here, this is the Vanguard Long-Term Treasury Fund, VUSTX. So I'm not just picking a number out of the air. This is the Vanguard Long-Term Treasury Bond Fund. The average return per year in the last 3 years is minus 15.7% per year. Now that compounds, but without compounding, you've got 15, 16, 32, 40, 48%, but compounds, you've probably lost more than 15%. Absolutely devastating if you had long-term bonds. Still really bad if you had intermediate-term bonds. By the way, the long-term treasury bonds over the last 10 years have returned 0.64% in total. That includes the yield. They're down that much. So if you bought long-term bonds anywhere in the last 10 years, you've not done well. And this is with the incredibly low expense ratio of 0.2% from Vanguard. If you had a bond fund that had a 2% expense ratio, just stack that on top of that as a loss. And so your returns are devastating. So a portfolio like the all-weather portfolio that works when you look backwards in time over a certain period of time, which has 40% long-term bonds, 15% intermediate-term bonds, and then commodities and gold and only 30% of the total stock market. And I'm now looking at a website called Portfolio Labs, Ray Dalio All-Weather Fund, and you can go look this up yourself. For the last 10 years, as of October 18th, 2023, so just recently before I put this podcast together, the annualized 10-year return of the S&P 500 was 9.65. The annualized return of the Ray Dalio portfolio is 4.35. So the S&P 500, almost 10. The Ray Dalio, just a bit above 4. You could have had half of your money in the S&P 500 and half of it in cash and beat his all-weather portfolio. Now, if you had half of it in the S&P 500 and half of it in bonds over that time frame using really short-term bonds, making 2%, well, you might have only made 6%. Very, in my opinion, very conservative portfolio, making 6% per year, while his portfolio made 4.35% per year. And this is one of the problems that whenever you look back at the performance of a particular investment, mutual fund, category, things change over time. So as soon as you make something that's static and relies on the wonderful performance from the early 80s up until, 2010, 2012, long-term bonds, without taking into consideration the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is that interest rates for long-term bonds went from 10 or 12% to about 1.5%. So not only did you get wonderful yields to start with, the bonds appreciated with value. But when long-term bonds pay 1%, 1% is your starting point of what you're going to make, minus fund expenses. And if interest rates go up, and it was my conviction, and I've talked about it many times in the show over the last several years, that bonds were about as low as they were going to get 2 to 3 to 4 years ago. And when those interest rates went up, the bonds that were already in a portfolio or that you already owned, if they were long-term bonds, not only did you only get the 1% yield, but those bonds dropped precipitously in value, because who wants your 1% bond when I can go out and buy a 4% bond that pays me 4% for the next 20 years? Your bond has to be marked down a lot. So probably not a great idea to have a large quantity in your portfolio unless interest rates are really high. And every time I've seen this analysis of the all-weather portfolio, it always starts when interest rates were killer high and people brag about how good it is. But as we can see, at some point it doesn't work. And the 10-year performance on this is awful, absolutely awful. And I think this website, again, portfoliolab.com, says that, let's see, what is this? Year to date is down 1% while the market's up 12. So just some thoughts on, schemes or plans when you see these things and they're promoted, especially if someone's making money off of them, how they beat the market or how they have beat the market. But it doesn't mean that they will beat the market. So just some thoughts on hedge funds, expense ratios, Warren Buffett, Ray Dalio, the all-weather portfolio, and hopefully that helps your understanding about a couple of things that are going out there in the world.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Welcome back, everybody. And as I promised, I have Mary Beth O'Connor with me. How are you today, Mary Beth?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Should I say Mary Beth, or do you like Mary or Beth or MB? What?
I'm from Central Jersey, so it's definitely Mary Beth.
Mary Beth. Okay. Fair enough. I'm not sure what that has to do with Jersey, but maybe that's a Jersey thing.
Yes. When I came to California, they were very confused.
Because I was thinking, with two first names like that maybe it's a Southern thing, not a New Jersey thing.
No, it's a Catholic thing, really. And a lot of people in my Central Jersey area had two names in that way. You often marry something.
Fair. That makes a lot of sense. Now, we, of course, are going to talk about your book and things in and around the book. And just so everyone knows that all good bookstores, the title of the book is From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. And when you got addicted, you didn't fuck around. I mean, you like really got into this stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I started young and I started hard. And so I picked up my first drug, which was alcohol, when I was 12. And by 16, I was using meth. And by 17, I was shooting up meth on a regular basis. And I did not get sober till I was 32. So it was a pretty long road. Yeah,
and I don't mean this to be rude. It wasn't in the book. Do you still have all your teeth?
Well, I had a lot of dental work.
Okay.
I have all my teeth, except there are also bridges and, all those other things, crowns, etc. But they look good now.
Yeah, because my understanding, which is nascent, is that methamphetamine is not good for your teeth. But I guess maybe that's, something else. So you started 12 with alcohol, seemed pretty harmless at the time. I'm assuming you hopped through a couple of different things and then ended up on meth, and that was your favorite, huh? That was your go-to?
I was really committed to meth. And I will say, I mean, I abused alcohol and I used, pot and pills and acid, but meth, I was definitely strongly committed to meth once I found that it just, for some reason, chemically fit me best. And so I pursued it heavily and for a very long time.
Yeah, and as I listened to the story, because I had the audiobook version, you did all this, made it through high school, and even made it through college? Is that correct?
Yeah, well, by the time I got really bad with meth, I was in my senior year of high school. And so, and also I had been a good student all along. So when I started missing a lot of school, which I did for the last couple months, they let me make it up. But also I had already been accepted to college by then. They don't really see your grades from the last half of your senior year.
Yeah.
And then when I went to college, I did do better with drugs for the first 3.5 years. I say better and good are two different words,
Yeah.
but it was better. But I had a really life-threatening kidnapping and rape in college and moved in with a violent boyfriend, and I just sort of lost the little bit of grip that I had on it, and I fell back into meth on a daily basis for another 10 years.
Wow. Now, if I recall in the story, and I'm assuming you're okay to talk about this stuff because here you are, and it's in your book, right? So, but if there's anything I go too far, let me know. In the book, you had mentioned that you started labeling your rapes because you had more than one. Am I remembering that right?
That's right. I mean, I had my stepfather, sexually assaulted me in the home. I had other incidents over the next few years that today we would probably consider rape, non-consensual sex, although in those days we didn't think about it that way.
I would.
But there were two incidents that were clearly in the rape box, and one of them was in Las Vegas, and one of them was in Los Angeles, and both involved 3 people. And so that was part of my looking at my life as just so filled with pain, and who else has so many rapes, they have to identify them geographically, was a real sort of turning point in how I thought about my history.
Yeah. Now when you were in high school, where does one get meth?
It was actually the first big wave of meth, at least in central Jersey. Methamphetamine had been around for a long time. I know they used it in part in World War II, but it wasn't really mass-produced until the mid to late 70s, at least in New Jersey. But there were biker gangs out in western Pennsylvania that had started up a mass production system, and it flooded my area of New Jersey when I was around 16. So it was readily available.
And I'm assuming the high production means it was affordable too, right?
It was relatively affordable. When I came to California and I found cocaine, that was in a whole different, financial system. But also, I was a pretty teenage girl, so I was often given drugs for free. So it's not like I was paying for everything, but still, it was a fairly cost-effective way to get high and to stay up for days.
Yeah. Now, you did mention being a pretty girl and people would give you stuff. I'm naive. So how does that work out? Do you hang with them and you just be around? Are there further expectations? Nothing's free, right? Is it?
I mean, it's a complicated dynamic because on one hand, these are, your friends. If you do a sort of a speed run with somebody, you're up for days. You're spending days together. Is there often sex involved? Yes. It's usually a very small percentage of the time that you're together. And so it's sort of a relationship where they probably expect sex, but they're really sort of your friend anyway, and there's drugs and it's sort of a tacit agreement, but it's not as if it's people that you don't like or that you don't get along with or that treat you badly. It's just that it's sort of part of the negotiation. But in a small town, you all are interacting with each other on a regular basis. There's a lot of interplay, and so there's sort of a communal aspect to it as well.
Fair enough. And if I can switch to parents, your parents maybe weren't the most nurturing people?
Yeah, I mean, my mother really wasn't connected to me. I was actually left in a nunnery for the first 6 months of my life, and later for 3 years with a great-grandmother. But mostly she just wasn't interested in me. She just wanted me to, be quiet, look pretty, and, don't bother her, basically. But then when she married my stepfather, it just got a lot worse, and that's when I was 9, because he was really violent with her, and he was physically and sexually violent with me. And it was just a house where you never knew what was going to happen. And it was, some days would be fine, and other days there would be a massive explosion based on little to no trigger. And so at first, when I moved in with him, I tried to figure out, well, he's got new rules. Let me try to, abide by them. But over time, I realized, no, this doesn't have anything to do with me. No matter what I do, if he's going to explode, he's going to explode. Maybe I could reduce the risk a little, but I could not control it. And so it was a really stressful situation to be in, where what you did and what happened to you were not really closely connected.
Wow. I do the best I can to understand that, but I'm sure I can't fully, because I never really had that at all. And so, you struggled with that. And so were drugs I don't know, did it numb the pain? Was it escape? Was it fun? What was the driver there?
I mean, it was sort of all those things. The data shows that if someone has what are called adverse childhood experiences, and especially if they're ongoing, the way they were in my household, my odds of developing a substance use disorder were at least 3 to 4 times higher than the average, because it is a couple things. The drugs are a pain reducer. You can shove your feelings down more easily. They can numb you out, but also, especially in the beginning, you feel good when you're high, and you're, giggling with your friends, and you're having fun, and you're, doing crazy things. And so especially in the early days, there is a positive aspect to it, a way to feel happiness that I wasn't used to feeling. And that is what caught my attention. This is a positive experience. I just want more of this.
Yeah, it's like when you mentioned, your mom pretty much ignored you, and that was the best part of your life, because it kind of went downhill from being ignored, and maybe you wished that you would be ignored again. But yeah, that's fascinating. Now, of course, college. What was your degree in college?
I was a history major, and I graduated from UC Berkeley.
Okay, I think that's a pretty prestigious school, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and you squeaked that out, and you had at some point, I think when you were considering going to law school, you had to get your transcripts, and you were concerned at how bad they were. How'd they end up?
Well, so when I got sober, by the time I got sober at 32, I had really lost my connection to who I was. And one of the things that I did always have as a child was school. I had always done really well in school. I got attention at school. Teachers saw me. They sort of valued my natural abilities. And so that was my positive place. But by the time I got sober, I had really lost my connection to that part of me. And so when I was going through my file cabinet and I came across my college transcripts, I was afraid to open them, because I thought, did I do as well as I think? It was 10 years earlier, and it seemed like distant history, and I didn't trust my own memory. And so I opened them, and I did have good grades in college, because I did better for those first 3.5 years. And so that was a relief. But it was also a part of recovery was about trying to reconnect to my original self, to try to remember who I had been before the abuse, before the drugs, and to try to build those bonds and bring out those parts of myself again.
Absolutely. And part of your recovery journey, I guess, I would be fair to say, you got involved with AA, and you talked about that quite a bit when you were here in Florida, about how that helped some but didn't help. Walk me through that experience and the pros and cons, please.
So when I went into rehab, and this is 93, I went in, in my mind, I was going in for medical treatment, but it turned out that my rehab was really a 12-step house. And 12 steps, it's Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, all of the Anonymouses. And 12 steps is a good fit for many, but it's also not the right fit for a large group of us. And so when I was in rehab, they told me I had to agree to have a higher power, which I didn't believe in a higher power, that I had to turn over my will in my life, which I wasn't going to do, that I had to agree I was powerless, that there was a focus on defects, none of which was a good fit for me. But I was told, like, repeatedly and vehemently that this is the only way to recover. And so it was a real shock to me to be told that there's only one way and a way I knew I couldn't do. And so I had to really figure out how am I going to proceed from here. And I just decided to try to look for the parts I could use. And so, I did go to a lot of 12-step meetings because they told me that's all there was. But I read all of the AA Big Book. I read all of the NA texts, and I was looking for the sort of some of the core ideas that I could use. And there definitely were things I was able to use. Like they have this one day at a time idea that I found helpful. The powerless idea, I thought about it, and I decided, well, I can agree on powerless to moderate. Like there's no moderating for me. And so I tried to pull the ideas that were useful, but it still wasn't the best fit. And so when I got home from rehab, I actually went to the library to see if there were other options because, there's no Google. Okay.
Right.
And so I did. There were other programs at that time, which I found, and there are even more today. And so there's a lot of choice I found. Women for Sobriety, which still exists today. I found Rational Recovery, which exists a little, but today it's mostly Smart Recovery. I found Life Ring Secular Recovery's Parent. And so there are a lot of different options. But for me, I actually ended up combining them into a program that worked for me. I sort of synthesized them. And today we even have a name for that. It's called a hybrid or a patchwork plan. So that's how I approached it. And I actually will have 30 years of continuous sobriety in January. So I think I built a pretty strong foundation for myself.
Yeah, you mentioned the helpless to moderate your drug use. It was either off or on. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't believe that I could ever use safely, and so I haven't ever picked up. Today we talk about substance use disorder as, a mental health disorder, which is what it is. But we talk about it on a scale, mild, moderate, or severe. And, today we emphasize don't wait for some horrible hard bottom. It's better to intervene if you're at the mild or moderate stage. But I would definitely be categorized at the severe end of that spectrum. And I don't believe I would ever be able to moderate any, mood-altering substance. And so I stay away from them all.
Sure. So that includes alcohol, pot, none of that.
That's right. Alcohol is, the number one abused drug in America.
Yeah.
It's still, the death rate of alcohol still, even with the overdose epidemic, alcohol pretty much is tied with overdose deaths. And so alcohol is definitely, it's a drug. It's just a legal drug.
Yeah. It's powerful stuff. You get too much of it and it'll wipe you out. So no doubt about that. And what are you doing now? And how did you get to be judge?
So when I got sober, I had this horrible resume because I was using meth, right? I couldn't hold a job. And so I really had to work my way sort of up into middle management, which is what I did over the first 5 or 6 years of my recovery. But at 6 years sober, I actually went to Berkeley Law School. And then I worked at a big law firm, and then I did class action work for the federal government. And I always emphasize, 20 years sober, I was appointed a federal administrative law judge. And I did that for 5.5 years, and then I took early retirement. And now I do a lot of advocacy work. I'm on the board for Life Ring Secular Recovery. I'm on the board for She Recovers Foundation. I write opinion pieces. I've had op-eds in the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times and others. I speak a lot, conferences, as you know, in Florida and others. I do, television, radio. I train lawyers and judges and peer support specialists. So this is sort of my part-time retirement life. It's my opportunity to be of service now that I'm retired and I can tell my whole story without sort of any professional consequence.
Yeah.
So it's a very rewarding time of life for me right now.
So if someone's listening and they're having trouble, can they contact you? Where should they call? What should they do?
Sure. I mean, my website, which is junkietojudge.com, you can message me through there, and I answer all messages. I also have other information on my website. You can follow me on Twitter at Mary Beth O _, where I actually don't argue with people. I just provide, new studies and articles and recovery thoughts. And then my book is available on Amazon and all the usual sites, plus bookstores, From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. But I'm happy to answer any message that someone sends me if I can be of help.
Fantastic. Now, is there any part of this that we haven't covered that you want to discuss? Because I want to leave some stuff secret so they buy the book. But what have we not covered?
I guess the one thing that I might add is I know a lot of your listeners may not be struggling themselves with a substance use disorder, but they often are friends or family of someone who does have one. And I talk to friends and family a lot. And one of the things I do recommend for friends or family is to look at the modern technique called CRAFT. It's community reinforcement and family training. And it's a way to, it teaches a more positive reinforcement technique to help the person that they love. And also it talks to them about the reality of what substance use disorder is and how recovery actually works. It's a very useful tool. And there's a related book called Beyond Addiction that I also always recommend to friends and family.
Excellent. Well, Mary Beth, thank you so much for coming and talking to me and sharing your story with my listeners.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions.
My mom is very religious, and she said, whatever you think about all the time, that's what you worship. Oh. If that's the case, I'd like everyone to pop open their Diet Coke cans and turn to page 37, Other People magazines! In this holy scripture, we read the parable of Miss Valerie Bertinelli. Once on television, then lost to pop culture. Now welcome back into the zeitgeist again, and the worst dressed shall be the best dressed, and the best dressed shall be the worst dressed.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm delighted you're still here, and I went ahead while you spent time listening to those great interviews, pulling up the information I should have had in the first place. I was talking about the Central Florida Free Thought Communities Cruise. So I've got some details here. And like I said, if you just Google CFFC Free Thought Cruise 2024, that probably should do it. I don't have the pricing here because the pricing guarantee deadline has passed. So you'll have to click on something and probably talk to the agent who is doing all of this booking. But it is from the 3rd to the 10th. Now, this will be my wife and I's second cruise ever. So we've only done this once before, and that was a CFFC cruise to Cuba, which I enjoyed for a while, but then I was just on a boat. I mean, it's really cool. To be honest, to be on a boat in the middle of freaking nowhere and see the full moon come up right as the sun is setting. Very, very cool for 15 to 30 minutes. After a couple hours, yeah, I saw that. I don't need to keep seeing that. Anyway, so that was a smaller boat. Didn't have as many stops. So this one could be wickedly better. The first thing, of course, it's February 3rd through 10th of 2024. So you're going to avoid the cold, probably no matter where you're coming from. It leaves at Port Canaveral. Port of Port Canaveral, I guess. Yeah. And the guest speakers, the headliners for the cruise is Aaron Ra and his wife, Lalindra Ra. So they're going to give presentations. That is going to be fantastic. And let's see, we're going to Puerto Plata, Dominican Republic, Cool. Never been there, so I'm excited. St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. Tortola. Oh my God, I'm probably trying to say this in Italian. British Virgin Islands. Another day or two at sea. And the Great Stirrup Cay in Bahamas. And then we return back on the 10th at Port of Port Canaveral. So I'm just going to read that. I don't know what the pricing is. Like I said, that's already been eliminated, at least from the website. My wife did all the booking because she is a gem. I like making money. I don't like spending money. And sometimes I am very weird and I suffer from financial dysphoria, which maybe most people do these days with inflation and prices going up. But I just look at the price of things and I have that old man mentality that used to cost X, that used to cost Y. Well, it doesn't, Phil. Get the fuck over it. But there I am anyway. So when it comes time to pay the bills in the restaurant, my wife is almost always grabbing that bill, or I hand it to her on some occasions, and she goes ahead and pays it so I don't have to see it. I actually enjoy the meal more not knowing what it's going to cost, because sometimes it just seems ridiculous. Why did we do that? We could have eaten at McDonald's, but sometimes it's nice to go out. So check that out, the Free Thought Cruise 2024, put on by CFFC, and join us. It's going to be a couple days, 7-ish days, but of course you have a day of kind of boarding and unboarding, but it's going to be a great way to get away from the cold. The other thing, of course, I was playing around with how I updated Audacity at the very beginning of the show, way a long time ago. And when I went to save that audio file for the introduction segment, all the settings changed. So hopefully there's no big difference in the sound quality from the beginning and ending segment as compared to the middle segments. I think I was able to change everything back to what I want. But anyway, just things change. The whole world is always a-changing. So that's going to be it for now, I think. Nothing else really meaningful. I'm going to go back and check on my pool. It's that time of year where I have to monitor it for about 3 to 4 months to make sure it's warm enough. But more on that later, maybe, if people are interested. I don't want to bore you to death. But that's the end of the show. Thank you for listening. And go out to a conference. If you're there and I'm there, please feel free to come up and say hello. Until then, ciao.
Rising up, back on my feet. Got knocked down, rose above it. Went the distance, I don't take no defeat. I will thrive, I will not just survive.
Listen, before I was a Christian, something was missing. Felt a little distant, dark, resistant. Made a decision, got a new vision. Wrote my goals, yeah, wrote my mission. BC, I was aimlessly walking. Then one day I heard the voice of God talking. Rise up, child, to the enemy mocking. Prayer is your weapon, pray without stopping.
Eye of the tiger is the thrill of the fight. Rising up to the challenge of our rival. With the heart of a lion and the armor of God, you will conquer it all with the eye of the tiger. Face to face with Satan himself. Don't budge an inch, he'll take miles. He'll find your weakness, he will hit where it hurts. Stand your ground, make him run for the hills. It's the eye of a tiger, it's the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rival. If you cast all your cares on him and pray through the night, you will conquer it all with the eye of the tiger. Rising up, straight to the top. Fight for Christ, give him glory. Go the distance, don't retreat, never stop. For the Lord always wins in the end. It's the eye of a tiger, it's the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rival. With the heart of a lion and the armor of God, you will conquer it all with the eye of a tiger.
Keep your eyes on God and your heart in the Word. Be a leader in Christ, don't follow with the herd.
The eye of the tiger.
Always walk by faith, never walk by sight. With the armor of God, you'll never lose the fight.
The eye of the tiger. Rising up, back on my feet. Got knocked down, rose above it. Went the distance, I don't take no defeat. I will thrive, I will not just survive.
Listen, before I was a Christian, something was missing. Felt a little distant, dark, resistant. Made a decision, got a new vision. Wrote my goals, yeah, wrote my mission. BC, I was aimlessly walking. Then one day I heard the voice of God talking. Rise up, child, to the enemy mocking. Prayer is your weapon, pray without stopping.
Eye of the tiger, it's the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rival. With the heart of a lion and the armor of God, you will conquer it all with the eye of the tiger. Face to face with Satan himself, don't budge an inch, he'll take miles. He'll find your weakness, he will hit where it hurts. Stand your ground, make him run for the hills. It's the eye of a tiger, it's the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rival. If you cast all your cares on him and pray through the night, you will conquer it all with the eye of the tiger. Rising up, straight to the top. Fight for Christ, give him glory. Go the distance, don't retreat, never stop. For the Lord always wins in the end. It's the eye of a tiger, it's the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rival. With the heart of a lion and the armor of God, you will conquer it all with the eye of a tiger.
Keep your eyes on God and your heart in the Word. Be a leader in Christ, don't follow with the herd.
The eye of the tiger.
Always walk by faith, never walk by sight. With the armor of God, you'll never lose the fight.
The eye of the tiger.